Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. We will start with the lower limb from this video. So in this video we'll see the introduction to lower limb. Those who are not subscribed to our channel, do subscribe now. We have about 90 video lectures in gross anatomy playlist. Go through that, it will be helpful for you. Subscribe now and keep watching the videos. We will move on to the topic, introduction to lower limb. So in this video we will mainly see how this lower limb and upper limb differs. So if you see this human lower limb, it is primarily adapted for weight bearing and locomotion. If you see the human upper limb, it has no locomotor function, but it has acquired to a great range of freedom of movement so that we can raise the upper limb above the head also. So if you see, this is the free upper limb and this is the free lower limb. How it articulates with the axial skeleton. Upper limb, free upper limb, articulates with the axial skeleton through the pectoral girdle, which is formed by scapula and the clavicle. Free lower limb articulates with the axial skeleton through this pelvic girdle, which is the hip bone, which consists of three parts. So this is the ilium, ischium, and the pubis. So this is the pelvic girdle, which articulates with a sacral vertebra behind, and these two pelvic girdles articulate with each other at the pubic symphysis. So you should now note the differences between the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle has three components: ilium, ischium, pubis, which fuse to form a single innominate bone is the other name for the hip bone. It was named as innominate as if it has no name. That's the meaning of innominate. Then it was changed to the nomenclature hip bone. So this pelvic girdle, we have understood, it articulates with the sacral vertebrae behind. Both directly articulate at pubic symphysis ventrally. You see the articulations of these hip bones with axial skeleton are large and there is limited movement, and this articulation is dorsal. So this pelvic girdle is mainly constructed for resistance to thrust rather than for mobility. So now we will see the differences between the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle. Pectoral girdle ossifies by both cartilaginous and by the membranous. As you know, the clavicle is ossified by membrane and scapula by cartilages. Two principal components, clavicle and scapula, remain separate. These two pectoral girdles do not articulate with the vertebral column behind. No direct ventral articulation between the clavicles in front. You see the pelvic girdle, it is entirely endochondral ossification. Three components are fused to form a single hip bone. Articulates with the sacral vertebra behind, and they too articulate directly ventrally at the pubic symphysis. Articulation of clavicles with the axial skeleton is sternum. They are relatively small, mobile, and ventral. So comparatively, it is freed from the axial skeleton, built for mobility. That's the main reason, and resilient to thrust. shallow joint with the limb bone so that it allows wide range of movements. Pelvic girdle, articulation of sacrum and the hip bones are relatively large, but mobility is less and it is dorsal. So it is massively constructed for resistance to stress rather than for mobility. But it is transmitting thrust. You see the deep limb bone articulating it by pelvic girdle. It is a deep joint, hip joint, but limiting the range of the movement. So these are the main differences between the pectoral girdle and pelvic girdle. You should understand so that you can understand the functions of the upper limb and the lower limb, and the upper limb joints and the lower limb joints, upper limb muscles and the lower limb muscles. So if you compare this, clavicle has no counterpart in the hip bone. Scapula corresponds to ilium and ischium. Pubis is not represented in the scapula. If you compare this pectoral and pelvic girdles, the parts of the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle, this is the comparison. Now we will compare the joints of the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle articulates with the distal free lower limb by the ball and socket hip joint. Both shoulder and hip joints are same type of joints, allowing some movement in all directions but limited in the hip. Proximal segment of the lower limb is the thigh, which has the femur bone. Proximal segment of the upper limb you should have learned, it's the arm, which contains the humerus. Intermediate segment of the lower limb is the leg, which has tibia and fibula. Primitively, both bones articulate with femur, but in man, fibula withdraws from the knee joint. Again, this is the difference between the upper limb and the lower limb if you compare the knee joint and the elbow joint. But both elbow and knee are hinge joints. Both wrist and ankle joints are hinge joints. So you see this is the fibula, which will not participate in the hip joint. But if you see the elbow joint, both radius and ulna will participate. Now the distal segment of the lower limb is the foot. It has 7 tarsal bones, 5 metatarsals and phalanges. What are the tarsal bones? Calcaneus, talus, navicular, 3 cuneiform. They are the medial cuneiform, lateral cuneiform, intermediate cuneiform and cuboid. So here 8 carpal bones you should have learned in the upper limb. So they are arranged in proximal row and distal row. But here this is separate arrangement and different arrangement. This is the calcaneus, talus, and this is the navicular, and this is the cuboid. And these are the 3 cuneiform bones, lateral, intermediate, and medial cuneiforms. So we will now compare the carpus and talus in the mammalians. If you see the carpus and talus, the tarsus, corpus and tarsus, we will compare. Tarsus is greater size, approximately threefold greater. Then carpus remains more primitive, retaining a full proximal row, all articulating with the forearm bones. But in the tarsus, only one talus retains this role in most mammals. So only one talus will articulate in the ankle joint. So this is the ankle joint. So this is the talus bone. You can understand this is the ankle joint, tibia and fibula, and this is talus will participate only in the ankle joint. And this is the calcaneus and navicular and the cuneiforms. Secondly, if you see a single proximal tarsal bone, calcaneus, projects back as a lever behind the tibia and fibula. This does not occur in the corpus. You will see again that. So this is the calcaneus projecting behind, even behind the tibia and fibula, as if like a lever. Thirdly, tarsal bones at intermediate joints permit some rotation. That is an important adaptation to uneven surfaces. So you just think when you are walking on the uneven surface, how will you will keep the foot on the medial border, sometimes on the lateral border. So that movement is permitted in the tarsal bones. In all the three modifications we have learned, you should have understood now tarsus is more advanced than the carpal bones. Bones in limbs, when compared functionally, they are the excellent examples of adaptation. In the lower limbs, massive, almost immobile pelvic girdle articulating with vertebral column, limited ball and socket mechanism at the hip and hinging knee and ankle, powerful lever of the foot. All these produce a lower limb highly developed for locomotion. But now we will see how this standing posture, so that the center of the gravity of the body has been running in the lower limb, brought closer to the vertebral column to lie behind and slightly at the same level as the hip joint. Then passes anterior to both knee and ankle joint. At the knee it passes towards the outside, and at the ankle it passes through the navicular. Because of the angulation of the femur and the foot, the fibula and the knee of each limb, tibia and knee of each limb remain close to the path followed by the center of the gravity. So this is the line of gravity passing through the vertebral column, through the hip joint, slightly anterior to the knee and ankle. Joints of the lower limb are more stable than their counterparts in the upper limb. If you compare the hip and shoulder, knee and elbow, and also the ankle and the wrist joint. How it is, the stability is due to shape of the articular surfaces, size and number, strength of the associated ligaments, size and strength of the muscles related to it. So now you can understand, if you dissect the lower limb, you can understand the size of the muscles in the lower limb if you compare with the muscles of the upper limb. Even joints, if you dissect, you can understand knee joint will have 10 ligaments around. So size, number, strength of the associated ligaments cause the increased stability. The knee has undergone change in that it has become closer to the midline as part of centering the body mass, so that its main function is reinforcing skeletal and than the muscular equilibrium. The human foot has perhaps undergone the greatest evolutionary change with that in the lower limb, has become locomotor prop. Joints within the foot less mobile, an adaptation to ground walking. During walking, the foot acts as a lever, adding propulsive force to that of the leg. The arches of the foot convert the foot into a complex spring-like structure, so that held in tension by ligaments and muscles. So if you see the foot shape of the foot, it is arched. So that is called arches of the foot. That is very important in the locomotion. Convert it into a complex spring-like, so that that arch is maintained by ligaments and muscles of the foot. So this is the articulated foot. If you see, this is talus, calcaneus, cuboid, and this is the lateral arch. So this is the lateral arch of the foot. This is calcaneus, talus, navicular, medial cuneiform, first metatarsal. So this forms the medial arch, whereas these are the longitudinal arches of the foot. So this is the medial longitudinal arch of foot, and this is the lateral longitudinal arch of the foot. So these are the important modifications in the foot which helps in the locomotion. The lateral arch steadies the foot on the ground, while the medial arch transmits the main propulsive thrust. So we have completed the comparison of the upper limb and the lower limb. Now we will see the surface landmarks in the front of thigh, knee, and also in the foot. You see the oblique skin grease, otherwise fold of the groin, that marks the junction of the front of thigh with the anterior abdominal wall. It corresponds fairly accurately to the inguinal ligament. So inguinal ligament you will learn from the lower limb, which is the ligament formed by the anterior abdominal wall muscle. So that indicates the junction between the anterior abdominal wall and the lower limb. If you see this lateral end of the fold, that will be the anterior superior iliac spine. So you have to palpate in the patient's lateral most end of the fold is the anterior superior iliac spine. So first palpate in your own body, then you can understand. From the anterior superior iliac spine, you can palpate behind the entire iliac crest along the entire length. Then if you come to the lower part of the thigh, lower end of the femur and the condyles can be palpated. Patella can be identified in front of the lower end of the femur. So this is the fold of groin which marks the junction of the anterior abdominal wall and the front of the thigh. So this corresponds approximately to this inguinal ligament which is attached to the anterior superior iliac spine to the pubic symphysis, which is formed by the lower border of the external oblique aponeurosis from the anterior abdominal wall. So if you palpate along this fold, what you palpate at the lateral most end of the fold is the anterior superior iliac spine. Then from this, if you palpate, you can palpate the entire iliac crest. In the lower end of the thigh, you can palpate the condyles of the femur and the patella. So this is the back of the thigh. This is the gluteal fold, marks the junction of gluteal region and posterior compartment of the thigh. Depression behind the knee joint marks the popliteal fossa. You will see this. So if you see in the leg, this represents the medial surface of the shaft of the tibia. So this part is subcutaneous, which will end in the prominence that will be called medial malleolus of tibia. On the lateral side, you can see, so this is the medial malleolus of tibia. And on the lateral side, lateral malleolus. So this surface is palpable. So this is the medial surface of the shaft of tibia. The horizontal gluteal fold in the back marks the upper limit of the posterior aspect of the thigh. The large and deep depression which can be seen at the back of the knee corresponds to the popliteal fossa. The subcutaneous medial surface of the tibia corresponds to the flat anteromedial aspect of the leg, which we have seen in the picture. Below the surface ends in the medial malleolus. Lateral malleolus formed by the distal end of the fibula. But if you compare the medial and lateral malleolus is somewhat distal and posterior than the medial malleolus. Foot. When the foot is on the ground, it rests on the posterior part of the inferior surface of the calcaneus and heads of the metatarsals, as it is arched in shape. So that heel is formed by the inferior surface of the calcaneus, covered by the tough fibrofatty pad. Extra the metatarsal are also covered with a similar pad, thick pad to form the ball of the foot. So we have learned the few surface marking in the foot lower limb also. But again, one more important point, if you compare the upper limb and lower limb muscles, upper limb muscles which will be formed in two compartments only you should have learned, anterior and posterior compartment. But in the lower limb, thigh will have three compartments, anterior, medial and posterior compartment. Leg will have three compartments, anterior, lateral and posterior compartments. So that is also the arrangement of the muscles in the lower limb and the upper limb comparison. I think you should have understood this introduction to the lower limb, which is an important feature. Before you start the dissection of the lower limb, you should understand the main differences between the functions of the upper limb and the lower limb and the modifications and the similarities so that it will be helpful for you. Thank you. Those who have not subscribed to the channel, do subscribe now. So in our channel, in the gross anatomy playlist, we have already 90 videos of gross anatomy lectures. Still more will be added. So do subscribe now. Keep watching the videos. Thank you.